All right, well, hello there, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, which is Mazske Finance, and I go by Mazske or Mark. But today is Sunday, June the 10th, the year 2022. And as you know, I was just in the country of Panama a week ago. The missus is still down there. But I have a very special guest with me today, and I'm sure you're going to love hearing from him. This gentleman, before I introduce him completely, and he'll tell you about himself, but he's actually an American, basically born in the United States, grew up in the United States. And he made a decision at one point in his life to retire and move to the country of Panama. All right, so with that being said, that's all I'll say on that. And I'm going to turn it over to Bob. So Bob, welcome to my channel.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to see you and finally meet you face to face.
That's it. It's good to see you too, because we've been in touch for several years now. I can't remember how we actually found each other. I think it was on Facebook, but it's been probably 3 or 4 years now from the first time we communicated.
Yeah, I believe we were both maybe subscribers to the Motley Fool. I may have contacted you through there, or you contacted me. I can't remember which it was, but it was through one of the investment websites, I believe.
That could be. You could be right, because I worked very part-time for the Motley Fool, and maybe you posted something about Panama that I probably emailed you through the Fool or something like that. Knowing me.
Probably. Yeah.
So, all right, that sounds good. All right, well, Bob, since I've never met you in person, I don't know a whole lot about you. My viewers don't know you. How about if you go back in time a little bit and just kind of tell us who you are, where you came from, and what led you up to making that decision when you finally decided you wanted to retire and move to Panama?
Okay. I spent probably the last 22 years of my career in the accounting field, not as a CPA, not the tax side, but more corporate accounting. You could call it a glorified bookkeeper, but controller, whatnot. And the last job I had was in the mountains of Western North Carolina, which was a great place to live. We loved it up there. Through the time I was there was like 15 years. Went through 3 managers, one of them very difficult to work with, and things just started getting really stressful for me. And of course, when you start getting in your 50s, you kind of start thinking about retirement. You know, how long am I going to have to keep doing this, and what am I going to do when I get done? And as things got more and more stressful, and my wife, who was a registered nurse, she worked in the emergency department, which is a very stressful position. She was there for years and years and years. She did like 30 some years of nursing. Things were getting really, really bad where she was working, because their hospital got bought out by a bigger corporation. And they started doing reorganization. They would just totally shut down a department, make you rehire or re-interview for a different position. And this happened 3 times during that period. And she was just really fed up with it. We had finally reached I'm going to say when I was 57, maybe, I started looking. I saw some blurb about Panama, about retiring in Panama. And of course, at that age, I'm thinking how long I got to put up with this. And so I decided to start investigating Panama. And so I did a lot of research online. A lot of people do, with the international living, and Kathleen Petticord puts out a monthly newsletter about Panama and whatnot. So I really got interested in that. And so I finally, somehow my wife got it out of me. I kind of kept this secret for a long time. Anyway, it finally came out. And so I said, well, let's just go down there and see what it's like. Just take a little trip and investigate. And so we did. We planned a trip, and when we got down there, we did a little exploration on both sides of the country, or actually from Panama City west. We didn't do any of the eastern part, in Cologne and the Darien, or we just stayed away from all that. But we explored.
One quick question for you. Yeah, because, and I can't remember now, what year was this? When you first visited Panama, what year was that?
That was probably in 2016 or 2017. No. I'm sorry. That would have been in 2013 or 2014, something like that.
Okay, well, and let me ask you this then, because my first time I went to Panama was back in 1988. I was 20 years old. I was in the Navy, and I flew into what was Howard Air Force Base. And so there was a military community there. So I met Americans, I met Panamanians, and I was a young guy. So from your perspective, you were, I think you said about 57. And if you had never been to Panama, when you first flew into Panama and you were introduced to the Spanish culture, the Panamanian culture, how was that? Was that like, were
We
you,
found it kind of exciting, something different, something new. There was some things that I saw in Panama that they don't tell you about in all the publications and whatnot.
right?
But as far as the culture went, we thought it was cool, and we got to see. I think on that trip we attended 3 different parades while we were there. It was they have 2 or 3 different Independence Days in November, and we got to go to parades in several different villages, and just thought that was really cool, and just a whole different kind of lifestyle from what we were used to. Not scary at all.
Right, right. That's pretty cool then. Because, as you probably, I believe, and my viewers know, my wife is actually from the country of Panama. So I have that connection with my in-laws there. And they always, when I do visit, they welcome me like I'm almost like I'm their son. They take care of me, they
Right.
feed me a lot, etc. But in your case, you didn't have that connection. It was you and your wife.
Right.
And you're both Americans. It was your first time in Panama. But on that first visit, how long did you stay there?
I think we may have been there for 10 days, something like that. And so it was not a lot of time in each place, just kind of bouncing around to see what the country was like, and if we decided to retire there, what might be appealing to us, because there's all kinds of sizes of towns. There's different climates depending on where you go. So there's a lot to be looking for, and different costs of living throughout the country, really.
Right, very true, very true. So when your 10 days was up, you went back to the United States. I think you were still working. So what kind of transpired with you and your wife did you decide to make like a second visit or a third visit, or what really led up to, deciding to move there?
Well, during our first trip down there, this is one thing I didn't bring up, is we were staying on a beach in Las Tablas in the Los Santos province down south. And we decided to go and visit the little village of Petitsi, which was only about 40 minutes away. And it wasn't really on my original radar. I'd heard of it, but I just decided, well, it seems to be quite a few people talk about this. Let's go down and see what it's all about. So we got down to Petitsi, and it's almost like immediately we felt this is it. We just loved the place, and ended up, while we were there, we picked out a piece of property. And I said, well, if we never move down here, at least I can probably resell it, at least break even, maybe even make a little money. I don't know. But anyway, it just seemed like the right thing to do. So we actually made arrangements to buy property while we were down there. Beyond that, we got back home, and the more and more we talked, we decided this might be something we wanted to do. And so we went ahead and we made several trips after that before we actually retired back down to the country to not only visit, but to be working on our residency visa. So we worked through an attorney there in Panama City. They were very good, fairly expensive, but they walked us through every step, went with us down to wherever we needed to go, took care of all the paperwork. All we had to do was sign our names, get our pictures taken, blah, blah, blah. And of course, you've got to get FBI reports from the United States. So we had to do some footwork over here too. but they made it a fairly simple process. And so by the time we moved over there, we were ready to pick up our cedulas. So we had permanent residency there.
Okay. So, and with the visa you got, like I have a pension coming in, so I can get their pensionado visa because I would qualify for that once I'm over the right age. But I can't remember now. If you care to share, did you get that kind of visa or did you get a different kind of visa?
What we went through was called the Friendly Nations visa. And I don't know if they still do that. I'd like to
They
put a
do.
little disclaimer out here at the beginning because this was back a few years ago. It's been several years since we moved back from Panama. So things may have changed a lot as far as I know. We went back and visited again in 2019, I think in October of 2019 to visit our friends. We met a lot of good friends down there. And of course, since then we've had the pandemic, so everything was just really kind of shut down. And so, but we went through the Friendly Nations visa. You had to have a minimum of $1,000 pension income. And you had to, I think you had to open a bank account at that time with at least $7,000. Those were the main requirements.
Okay. I've been reading about some of the other visas out there now, and they still have the Friendly Nation visa, but the requirements have changed. I think they had like two versions, and I'm not an expert on it all. I'm not a lawyer, not an attorney, CPA, nothing like that. But then, something I'll throw out here real quick. I just came back from Panama last Monday. I got home about 2:30 in the morning, Monday night, Tuesday morning. And I made a video, I think on this past Tuesday, about pros and cons of living in Panama. And it was probably because of me making that video on YouTube, other videos about Panama started popping up as suggestions. And I found a channel that I never seen before. It's called Panama Relocation Tours. I don't know if you've ever seen that one or not, Panama Relocation Tours.
I'm somewhat familiar with them. I didn't use them, but I know people that have. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that channel, I like it because to me, it's very informative. They've had attorneys talk on their channel. They've had Panamanian doctors talk on their channel. They've interviewed a variety of different expats from Panama City to Cherokee and other towns in between. So, but anyway, let's go back. I think we kind of skimmed over it. When you bought that piece of land in Tennessee, what transpired with that piece of land? And you mentioned you moved back to the States. So how did it all play out when you were in Panama?
Okay, well, we moved over there in December of 2015. And at that time, we got a rental, which was in a little town of Limon, just about 5 minutes outside of Tennessee. And while we were renting there, we made arrangements with the person that sold us the property to have a house built on that property. He was and is still probably the most respected builder in the town. I know people that can give you some horror stories with others. So if anybody goes down there and wants to build a house, I would do a lot of checking around before you sign on the dotted line with anybody. But this fellow was from Israel, and he'd been there for quite some time. He had already built up quite a community of houses. And so we made a deal to have him build our house. And he got it done in about 7 months, which was really good. I designed the house and he put it up just the way we wanted it. It was pretty much more of a Panamanian style home. I didn't want to live just like an American like we had over here, but yet we still had American conveniences, a nicer refrigerator with an ice maker, and we had a dishwasher, and things that we're used to having. But it was still red clay tile roofs. Outside was plaster, whatever they put on the outside of their homes. Inside was concrete, acid stained concrete floors. So they were very pretty. We were very happy. We were the first ones in that neighborhood that had a screened porch. He had never done a screened porch before. So that was the first. Also, we were the first that put in granite countertops in that neighborhood. He'd never had those before. So those were a couple of firsts. But anyway, we really liked the house. We were situated exactly midway between the village, Main Street, and one of the main beaches. So we could drive to the beach in about 3 minutes. If we wanted to walk it, it'd take about 15. Same way, if we wanted to walk to town or drive to town, it was very convenient location for us. So we were happy with that. And this particular beach is the one that they use, all the fishermen use to come in and out of. They go out every day. And it's also the main point where they leave to go to Isla Iguana, which is a little island off of the coast of Petitsi. It just looks like a Caribbean island, surrounded by white sand and light blue water. It's just really pretty little place to go out and spend a day. But anyway, we lived there. We had to travel a good distance to go buy a real grocery store. I mean, the town had probably 5 little supermercados, I guess they call them. They're basically the size of a convenience store that we would have here, but it's they consider it a full-scale grocery store because it's got a meat counter, all that kind of stuff. So we could buy a lot of stuff there in town, but for big shopping, we go to either Las Tablas or Chitre. So you're talking either 40 minutes away or an hour and 15 minutes drive. Just depends on what you want. If you can totally live like a Panamanian and just shop at their little stores, you could do all right. It's fairly inexpensive. It's when you get to trying to find American products, you're going to pay through the nose for a lot of those. There's a small chain of stores in Panama called Reba Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with them. There's one in Chitre, probably Santiago, David, and Panama City. But they kind of cater to the expats. They import a lot of American stuff. So you can like buy a sleeve of Coca-Cola there, the cans, but you're going to pay like 75 cents a can for them. Whereas here you can buy a whole sleeve of them for $4. So just depends on what you want and what you're willing to do. I'll say the beef there, no bueno. It's pretty tough. Comes from like Brahma cows that I don't think they feed them any grain. They're just out there grazing and they're not fattened at all. So they're pretty lean and pretty hard to deal with. I did find a few cuts at some stores that were usable for some things, but otherwise pretty much stuck with chicken and pork.
Okay, it's interesting because when I'm there, I eat a lot of chicken, pork, fish, and beef as well. But when I've had beef, it's usually very tasty to me. I like it.
Really?
And I think I said it in a video, I'm very familiar with Panama City. And my wife is from an area, it's a town called Panama, which when you travel to Petitsi, Main Street, Route 1 goes right smack through Panama.
Yes, it does.
Right. So you might have heard me say in a video, we have the opportunity on my wife's family's farm. We may perhaps be able to get a piece of land, perhaps several acres where we could build a house there if we wanted to. The pros and the cons to that, pros would be we're very close to her family. Cons, we're very close to her family. Pros and cons.
I understand that.
Right. But at the same time, we're not in the mountains and we're not on the beach. it's more like it's farmland. And part of me, if I moved to Panama, more like even if I lived there part of the year, I think I would like to be close to the water or up in the mountains. But my preference, I think, is closer to like the ocean, which
Yeah.
something like Pedicee may or may not work for me, because Pedicee, I read about it. I saw something the other day about it. I think the population right now is about 4,000 people. Does that sound about right to you?
It could have grown that much. At the time we were there, I would think 2,000 to 2,500. And of those, about 200 or 300 of them were expats.
Okay.
It might have grown. Now Pedicee, let me make this statement. Pedicee is actually also a district. So there's the town of Pedicee, which includes Playa Venal, that includes Cañas. There's a number of little villages included in that. So that 4,000 could easily be true in the district. Kind of like me saying in the county I live in, there's this many people.
Right. That's probably what it was. I don't remember where I saw that at. I think it was a YouTube video I watched. A guy was comparing Pedicee with Cherokee. He had lived like 6 months in both locations and was comparing and contrasting the two different communities.
Yeah.
So,
We explored the Cherokee region. With everybody's always talking about Boquete, and so we went there. Personally, we kind of found it a little bit too Americanized now. And in talking with some of the local people, they're not really happy with the Americans being there, because now they really can't afford anything in their own town. It's gotten so expensive. We also really loved the weather up in Volcan, which is just a little bit higher. And it's much cooler than Pedicee. My wife, not really crazy about heat, but Volcan itself just doesn't really have any personality. It's good weather, about all I can say for it.
all right, that's interesting. So, knowing everything you know now, well, let me ask this. I can't remember now, but how long did you actually spend living in the Pedicee area?
We lived there for 2.5 years. And I'm sure everybody's wondering, well, why did you move back? Well, what happened was my wife had a brother who at the time was about 82 years old. And he called her and said, I think I've had a stroke. And so, he wasn't totally disabled or anything, but she began to get concerned because he has never been married. So he has no family, and all the rest of, his parents and everybody's, they've passed on. So really my wife is the only relative he's got. And we finally decided that we had to come back here to kind of help him through his final years, however long that may be. We had no idea how long it would be. He did pass this past September, and but that's what brought us back. We considered leaving keeping our house there in case we could go back, but I just couldn't really see me doing that and then coming over here and paying rent while we stayed here at the same time. It's just too much, and plus the cost of moving back and forth it's very high. So I just can't see doing it again. If it hadn't happened that way, I think we'd still be there.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and you had told me about your wife's brother before, and like I said, then I'm sorry to hear that. But as you know, for all of us, that's part of life. So we can't change that, unfortunately. So, all right. Well, let's see. Well, I don't think we brought this up. I don't think you brought it up. But before you retired, was the main reason you wanted to go to Panama, was it, say, with finances? Because I talk to a lot of Americans who tell me they will work till the day they die because they cannot afford to retire. Was it something similar to that?
Yeah. At the time we retired, I was my wife and I were covered under my employer's group insurance policy. And in order for me to keep that when I left, would have been about $1,100 a month, which I just really couldn't see doing. And plus, when you leave, you have a COBRA of like 18 months and then you're on your own. So I just didn't see that working. So that's the main reason we moved to Panama, was to save that money. And when we got to Panama, we were able to get insurance, believe it or not, through Blue Cross Blue Shield of Panama. And when we got there, I think it cost us $200 a month to cover us both. And once we hit 60, which was just the next year, it went up to $300 a month. And of course, it didn't have the like $1 million coverage that we get with some policies over here. It did have a limit of like maybe 200,000. But with the medical expenses being so much less over there, I thought, that's probably okay. Because, open heart surgery is about 25% of what it costs over here.
Oh, okay.
Not that I want open heart surgery.
Right. I understand that. I don't either. But none of us know what our future holds for us. None of us know what kind of health expenses we may have down the road. But I hear that a lot about healthcare in Panama. I've seen like price breakdowns comparing it to the United States. And for almost everything, it's much cheaper in Panama than it is the United States. And it's almost cheap enough. If someone had, say, a fair amount of money, maybe they have a pension, they got a little pot of money, they could probably almost go without insurance, because they could say, worst case scenario, I have a car accident and I break something and the hospital bill might be, $10,000 or $20,000. Where in the United States, you might have a hospital bill. If you have an accident, it might be $1 million.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to have a pretty big pot of money before I'd consider going without insurance. That's just kind of person I am, but I just like to be protected when I can. One thing I'll say about Petitsi, it does not have a hospital there. There was one built there back before we moved there. There was a hospital built, but the funding was never provided to staff it. So when we moved to Petitsi, all there was a little clinic in town. They had a doctor there, and we actually went there a couple of times. And to see the doctor was $2. So the prescription we ended up having to go to the pharmacy and get cost us like $3.50. So the prescription was more expensive than the doctor visit. And we did have to go to doctors in Las Tablas maybe once or twice. And their charge was more like 25, I think. So still pretty reasonable.
Right. And then say the doctor in Las Tablas, was that more than likely, was that like a specialist where they charge more, or is that just a regular general type doctor?
That was pretty much a general practitioner. We had to go, in order to get the insurance, we had to go get a little physical. So that's why we were there. We made an appointment and went and got a physical. And maybe because we were getting a physical, that changed the fee. I don't know. But, 25 was certainly reasonable. That's equal to or less than what we'd have for a copay on insurance here.
Right. That's true. Well, let me ask you this then. Knowing what you know about the country, you've been to Panama City, you've been to Chiriquí, Volcan, you lived in Petitsi. So you've been pretty much from Panama City almost up to the Costa Rican border, up in Volcan.
Yes.
So you've seen the various climates, maybe you didn't spend time, but you drove through a variety of different small towns and areas. Knowing what you know about Americans, not a large percent of Americans will make that decision to retire outside of the US, but ones who are considering it, how would you rank Panama as a whole for them? Do you think because I hear Americans like online, you hear them talk about Panama, Costa Rica, Vietnam, Philippines, Taiwan, different places. But for yourself, how would you rank Panama there? Would you think it's a good place worth checking out, or?
I really do. I looked somewhat at Costa Rica, never visited there, but I did do some research on Costa Rica and Ecuador. Costa Rica was considerably more expensive than Panama. Ecuador, I just didn't, it looks nice, but I just didn't feel as safe about their government. And I can't really remember, it's been quite some time back why that is. But plus they've had a number of earthquakes there too. One thing I liked about Panama was that it's out of the hurricane belt. Hurricanes can pass by and create some waves and whatnot, but you don't get the hurricane winds and whatnot to damage like you do in other places. And of course, I liked the fact that I could take American dollars down there and spend them just like their Balboa. Whatever you got in your pocket, they'll take it. Either way, I could take my stereo or TV down there, plug it right into their wall outlets. There's no difference there. Really, the big difference is the language. And that would be my number one suggestion to anybody considering moving down there, is to learn Spanish. Because truthfully, unless you're in Panama City, there's not a whole lot of people that do speak English. I think you mentioned in your video, they teach it at school. It's not sinking in, or people just don't practice it. But I think if anything would have made our lives in Petitee better, it would have been knowing the language better. We relied a lot on, you'd find some people in town that could speak English, some Panamanians that could speak English, and they would help you out. But having to always rely on somebody like that is not the best of situations. So if we spoke fluent conversational Spanish, would have been tremendously better. So I would highly recommend that you really work on that.
I agree. Because when I first went to Panama, I was 20 years old and I didn't speak any Spanish. And from day one, I wanted to learn Spanish. And I think I said it in a video. I'd been there 10 days when I bought a motorcycle. So it was prior to being there 10 days. I had walked from where I was at, a little base called Farfan. I walked up to Howard Air Force Base for something. And walking back on the sidewalk, in the main base then, Panamanians could drive through the front gate and drive all the way through the Navy base, the Air Force Base, the Army base, to go out the gate on the opposite side. So it was an open base back then. So we would get Panamanians that would walk through the base as well, like the main road.
Right.
So I was walking back from Howard Air Force Base to Farfan, and I saw a female approach me who looked Hispanic. And I was like 20 years old. And I remember thinking, all right, Mark, talking to myself, how do I say hi? And I was like, it's hola. And I remember saying, hola. And she answered me like, hola, ¿cómo estás?
Yeah.
And that threw me because I didn't speak Spanish. And I was like, I smiled. And as I walk away, I'm young and I'm kind of dumb. And I'm like, wow, I just communicated in Spanish.
I remember a lot of people in Petitee, I would always try to speak to them when I went past them. And I would try hola. And sometimes they would reply with buena.
Right.
Or if I said buena, sometimes they say hola. I didn't know which one to use, but either one seemed to work. And they were all, they were very friendly. I didn't run into many grumpy people over there.
I agree. When I was there, I used to go into Panama City a lot. I go into Balboa. Balboa was very Americanized, but it was also, by the time I was there, Balboa had been turned back over to the Panamanians. It used to be owned by Americans. And I remember going in restaurants and they would be like, say in broken English, oh, you speak English. And I might say, sí, pero quiero hablar en español. Like, I want to speak Spanish. and they would help me out. I would be like looking at the menu, and they would say the word in Spanish, and I'd be like, KS, what is that? And they would tell me what it is in English.
Yeah.
And then, because I was young then, and my brain was more absorbent when I was 20 than it is now.
Oh, God. Yes, yes, absolutely. Something else I didn't bring up. One of my favorite parts of living in Tennessee was we could go, you know what a fonda is? It's those little neighborhood hole in the wall restaurants, maybe 4 or 5 tables, whatever. And we could go and eat lunch. I mean, a really good filling lunch for like $3.50 each. Get a quarter of a chicken and some rice, some lentils or beans or something like that, and maybe a fried banana or some patacones or something. But you'd walk out of there full for $7. And I get back here to the United States, and I can't go out to lunch and spend less than 30, it seems like. So, and that's drinking water.
Yep, that's true. That's very true. And that's one thing I enjoy. Like, I'm a very a frugal type person, and my wife and I, we both say we're not big socializers, but at the same time we like meeting new people. And here in the States, if we go to McDonald's, which we don't go to McDonald's anymore, but if we did, it's at least $20 probably for 2 of us to eat. If it's a step up from McDonald's, like you said, around $30. Yeah. But there, we could go out to breakfast, we could go out to lunch, and for 2 people pay less than $10, have a filling meal, meet some new folks, some new individuals. Because once you leave Panama City is fine. There's a lot of friendly people there. I know I made 2 videos when I was in Panama City, and we went for walks. It's kind of been, it's cleaned up a lot from when I was stationed there. But we met various people. I got in conversation with them. But when you get outside of Panama City, is very congested. It's a lot of people. It's hectic. When you leave Panama City, it's a smaller town. And it's hard to meet as you said, you don't meet a rude person. You may meet a shy person, but you don't meet rude people.
Right. Yeah, they just seem to take life as it comes. It's all bueno.
Right. I agree. Bueno, or it's like tranquilo. Tranquilo is like
calm and easy.
Yeah.
It's a good place. Now, I would recommend it highly, but I wouldn't do it sight unseen. One of the things that shocked us when we got down there was trash just dumped on the side of the road. And I don't know if that's improved. I know that they have outlawed plastic garbage or plastic grocery bags now. So that was a big part of what you would see is all those colored plastic bags everywhere. Tennessee was really good about keeping things clean. I'll give them that. You didn't see trash laying around. The mayor was very adamant, always online, telling people to pick up after themselves, not leave stuff on the beach, blah, blah, blah. He was great. He's still there too. So Tennessee was probably the cleanest little town that we saw.
Okay. Well, I know the difference from I spent 2.5 years there back in the late 80s, 1990. Went back to visit in 1993, 1999. Then I didn't go back again until 2016, then again in 2022. And the difference in 2022, just last week, for cleanliness, it was a marked improvement because they did outlaw, right? They did outlaw plastic bags. There are still, when you're driving on whatever you call it, like I call it Route 1, the main highway, you still in some country spots will find an area where there's some trash on like a little pull off where people dump it, but it's not as bad as it used to be. So it is getting better.
Yeah. Yeah, they'd always use those little like turnaround spots that they put along the highway.
Right.
It seemed to put them up there, dump their trash and go on their way. Well, I'm glad to hear it's improved because that was one of my biggest negatives.
Right. And well, just living it, like, I think I told you, I've never been to Tennessee. My wife and I plan to return to Panama sometime January, February, March of 2023, sometime in that time period. And every time we go there, we visit family, either family in Panama City, family in Panama, and we just see family. But our next trip, our goal, we don't want to avoid family, but yet we're probably not going to tell them we're visiting, and we're going to go up to Tennessee. We're going to go to Cherokee, Boquete, Las Tablas, and some different spots. And maybe we'll swing by the family and say, hey, we're just down for a quick day trip. So it's good to see you again. We got to get back.
Just don't post anything on Facebook.
That's it. 'Cause I'm Facebook friends with a lot of my in-laws, nieces, and nephews. So,
Don't. Yeah, it sounds like a fun trip though.
right, it would be. It would be. And so we'll see, because Panama, I'm more familiar with Panama City to Panama, like Coronado, Gorgas, or Rio Alto, and some other places, beach places. When I was there 30 years ago, they were just nice beaches. Nowadays, they're high dollar resorts, and they built up quite a bit. But the farther, I say north, but it's not north, like the farther away you go from Panama City, it seems like it's less developed until you get up to like Boquete, where it's more Americanized.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
one question: if you watch I think you watched my videos, pros and cons in Panama. What was your perspective? Say, living in Tennessee, what was your perspective on animals, dogs, chickens, and roosters?
Yeah, it can get noisy because, like you say, you can't call the police about your next door neighbor's dog barking. Thankfully, I don't think we really had too much of that in our neighborhood where we were at. Fireworks was probably the biggest issue. I mean, they use fireworks for every occasion. You know, I don't even think you have to have an excuse. They just shoot stuff off. So especially on the designated holidays when you'd expect fireworks, they'll be doing it. It'll still be going off 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So we used sound machines in our bedroom, you know, and kind of block out the noise. But I'd say we had more trouble with firework noise than with the animal situations. And like you said, there are stray animals everywhere. I did volunteer with the spay group in Tennessee. We'd have a clinic every month and do free cat and dog neutering, spaying, trying to cut down on the number of unwanted animals running around. And it did seem to make a difference, but you're never going to get rid of all of them.
Right. Yep. That's very true. It's very true. So, all right. Well, it's the first time we've talked like this, but knowing how I am and just chatting with you, I think we could probably talk for a long time longer, but for the sake of our viewers, we can kind of wrap this up. So,
sure. Well, it's been good to finally get to meet you face to face and get to talk about Panama, which I still love. We hope to get back and visit. We have a lot of good friends down there.
Well, good. And now, we stay in touch periodically. So if we do end up building or buying somewhere in Panama, I'll let you know where we're at. And even if we don't live there permanently, my wife want to visit, we'd have bedrooms and bathrooms.
That'd be great.
Give you a free place to stay.
Yeah, I'll give you my number.
All right, sounds good. Well, I got your email address and on Facebook, Facebook friends.
Yeah. All right, Mark.
Well, sounds good. We'll tell you what, I'm going to stop recording, but then stay connected. I'm going to chat with you briefly, then we'll.
Okay, sure.
All right. Thanks so much, Bob. I do appreciate this.
All right, you're welcome. Hope it works out.
All right. Thank you. All right, so for Bob and Mazske Finance, we hope you found some value in this video. And if you are out there and you're potentially considering moving to Panama, feel free to reach out to either one of us. Just comment in the comments below that you're interested. And if it's say a question for Bob, I'll let him know and he can check it out, probably reply to you. So for both of us, thanks for watching. Y'all take care, stay safe in all you do. And Mazske and Bob are signing out.